Oh, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to week 11 in CU 122. What a big week we have. We are delving into the world of eclairs this week, and I know that you guys are going to rock the house on this one. You guys also rocked the house on last week's focaccia assignment, which I'm getting really excited to talk with Chef Suzanne here about in just a few minutes. I took a look at a bunch of your assignments and I was really impressed. And as your chef instructor, I was really impressed with this class's on-time submission rate. So thumbs up to you guys. And Chef Suzanne and I really appreciate that extra effort that everybody's putting in to get everything in on time. It just says a lot about your professionalism and it says a lot about who you are. And as a side note as well, I know I've been sending out a lot of messages to everyone regarding posting attendance on time, and what we're trying to do is get this class to be #1 as far as posting attendance as well. I would not be pursuing this if I did not think it was possible, because I don't believe in setting people up for failure, and this class has what it takes to achieve that goal. So really keep working on that, and fantastic job on your submissions for week 10. So thank you very, very much, everybody, and I know Chef Suzanne feels exactly the same way. Tonight we have a pretty big class tonight because this week's kitchen assignment does require a little bit of additional stuff. So we're going to jump right into Chef Suzanne's pool and take a look at some great highlights from week 10. Chef Suzanne.
There we go. I had to unmute me. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I think this has probably been my favorite week so far, and I think they just get better and better. I just can't even wait to open the next assignment to see what I'm going to get to see. And I can tell this week a lot of people, and I feel like I'll see a lot of head nods for this, that everyone felt a lot more comfortable with this week's assignment than last week. It's like you got all the nerves out last week with that French bread, and this time you're like, okay, I got this. I see where this is going. I get this. And so I could see the comfort in the pictures and in the presentation. So this one was a lot of fun. So I thought this was great from Shonda, showing some the interior and how the focaccia looks coming out of the oven. And again here, another one, the up close. Charles did a really good job of these up close photos here.
Yeah, he did.
And Gary knocked it out of the park this week. Gary was like, no, you will use my photos because they're amazing. So Gary just totally blew me away. My husband happened to be walking through and he came back and was like, that looks really good. I was like, yes, it does. So Anthony Hauser also went above and beyond. I feel like he just could not even decide, like in his mind, like, I'm not really sure what I should flavor it with. I'm just going to do everything I'm thinking. And that's just so much fun to see all the different things that got done. Like here, Mildred made some, looks like some bolognese with some pasta to go with hers.
Wow.
I know, right? They were just like, oh yeah, we're going to do this real big this week. And Eliza, another one who was just like, I'm not sure what to do. So the one on the left, I can't remember what kind of cheese she's got there, but she's got caramelized onions, mushrooms, spinach. Then she's got one that's got the herbs and the cheese and marinara. And then the top one, she did breakfast. So it's got bacon and eggs and cheese on it.
Wow.
I know, right? Kenneth decided that he was going to do his take on the tour of Italy. So he's got gnocchi with pesto and some Alfredo, and then it looks like some bolognese on the side. So
wow,
yeah, they just went all out with these presentations. Look at that.
That's fantastic.
I feel like this has probably been everybody's family's favorite week, because I feel like everybody ate super good this week. So like not only did stuff look good, but it tasted good because they went all above and beyond with presentations.
You know, Chef Suzanne, and we'll be very honest with all of you out there. Every now and then we get, or not every now and then, but quite a bit, we get rock stars in our class, but rarely do we get a class full of rock stars. And I think this class, CU 122, this block is absolutely fantastic. that was some really quality stuff that we saw in there. So, you know what, ladies and gentlemen,
And in all fairness to the others, there was more. There was so many more that are not even in there that I didn't hear back from folks, or that I haven't even rated yet, that I just kind of clicked through some. I mean, this is just a tiny sampling of this giant group of folks and all that they do. So yeah, it's been pretty awesome.
Everybody should be extremely proud of themselves out there, because the quality of that work for being in culinary school, I think is absolutely fantastic, because that was a professional level of work that we saw. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, very, very much. And it feels really good for us as instructors to see that kind of quality of product being produced. And so that's what it's all about, and that's why we do it. So thank you. Thank you, Chef Suzanne. That was fantastic. We are going to mention this a couple of times over the next hour or so. All makeup work, including any missed assignments or missed knowledge checks that you have out there, need to be submitted no later than Tuesday, June the 18th by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. That is the end of this current week, week 11. So make sure that you get all of your work in. If you are simply trying to raise your grade because you got a 90 versus 100 on an assignment, we ask that you don't use a makeup assignment for that. Go ahead and reach out to me, and we'll talk about some other alternatives to see what we can do to help you out in that department. If you are concerned about your grade at this stage in the game, certainly reach out and let me know. I've been trying to get hold of a couple of you and haven't had too much success, but we are here to help you succeed, and we're going to do what it takes to get you through the class. So hold on tight. Ladies and gents, let's jump right into our slides this week to get going here. And I have to do this kind of manually, so I apologize. Here real quick. I miss my computer at home. All right, can everybody see the screen now?
Yes, Jeff, we got it.
Yes, I'm working from an alternate location for the next several months, and usually at home I have a fairly nice setup with several different monitors and everything else, like an online instructor would have. However, I'm not having that right now, so it's a little different. Ladies and gents, week 11 in CU 122. Let's finish strong. It's you know, we've noticed over the past couple of years that as people get towards the end of the block, they kind of put the brakes on and they start to slow the horse down a bit. We don't want to do that. We want to finish strong. In the restaurant industry, first plate is same as the last plate, and everything in between has to be exactly the same as well. So don't be putting your brakes on. Keep it going. We have 2 weeks left in this course. I just mentioned this a moment ago. All makeup work is due no later than Tuesday, June the 18th at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. We've noticed that occasionally there are some students out there that have a tendency to procrastinate just a little bit. And Chef Suzanne and I had a small talk about that earlier this week. And procrastination is the kiss of death in the restaurant industry. Any successful chef is working 2 to 3 days in advance. If we have a party, a function for 500 people or 1,000 people, when do you think we start cooking? We start planning weeks in advance, so we lay everything out. Isn't that right, Chef Suzanne? You want to fill in on this? I know Chef Suzanne's hot on this topic too.
I do. I love events, banquets, catering, but it's weeks in advance that you start really figuring out scheduling and ordering, you know, what prep has to be done when, working on lists, and always planning in advance. You can't plan. I mean, I had, you know, for those of you that may have been here a minute or two before class, I had 15 people here at my house for a swim party. I haven't planned this for a week. So, yeah. You know, it's hard to throw together event for 500 people in a day. You know, you have to have everything structured and planned and be very organized. Can't wait till the last minute. You just can't. It's just a really great habit to get into now, to be able to work on that scheduling, the mise en place, all that's involved. You know, events are wonderful, but only if they go good. They can be, you know, a bad event is can be the kiss of death, just like Chef was talking about. You know,
Mhm.
one really bad event for 1,000 people can destroy a business. So you got to be on top and be organized always.
Yep, absolutely. Work in advance. As a chef, if I'm doing a party for 500 people at 8 o'clock, if my staff isn't outside on break at 7:45, then I have failed, right? Because we should have had everything done in advance. In other words, you need to start relating that now to what you're doing here in school. So that means if an assignment is due on Tuesday, you should be breathing down our neck trying to submit it on Friday. It's just working in advance, and it's a great habit to form it now. So start looking forward to that to help you out. Please contact Chef Warren if you are concerned about passing this class. Like I mentioned, I'm trying to reach out to some of you to get you some additional help and some support. Chef Suzanne and I have every intention of getting every single person through this class, and we are here to do that for you. So please let us know what we can do to help you. Focus on your prep list this week. Week 11 is a little bit tricky in this class. We're doing eclairs. Traditionally, we have one item or two items to do within a weekly period. This week, we have 3 different things that we're working on: the pâte à choux, the pastry cream, and the chocolate ganache. So it takes a little bit more organization, and it's not something you can wait till Tuesday to start, because otherwise it's not going to work. And then makeup work is only for missed or failed assignments, not to raise the grade that you received on a prior assignment, like I just mentioned. And if you are one of those individuals that's shooting for 100, more power to you, and we're here to support you. Reach out, contact me, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. Anybody have any questions on that? Thoughts, concerns? Here's a couple of quick quotes for everyone that I thought were really motivating. Jose Andres is one of my most favorite chefs. I'm sure many of you have heard from him, or heard of him. He was the one that really helped out in Puerto Rico during the hurricane with feeding people. He owns many restaurants, Bazaar, Mini Bar, and several others throughout the country. And his big saying is, as chefs, we cook to please people, to nourish people. And you always need to remember that. A great chef is someone who wants to please other people. So always keep that in the back of your mind, that you're here. A restaurant, the term translated into English means a place of nourishment, a place of rest. And that's literally what we're doing to people. We're providing much more than a plate of food. We're helping them get up and get going. And then another great chef who is a multi-talented, Daniel Boulud. To me, there's no great chef without a great team. And that is something I've stressed in the past couple of messages to everybody. Once you get into the kitchen, you're only going to be as successful as those around you. So, I mean, this would not be a successful class if I was doing this by myself. Fortunately, I have a great team member, Chef Suzanne, who really helps things work. And that's the way things go in the culinary industry. It's about us. So when I send out those messages talking about teamwork and everybody posting attendance and getting your assignments in on time, it's the way it rolls in the industry. So great habit to get into now. Ladies and gents, let's take a quick look at week 11 in CU 122. Oops. This week, it is critical that you focus on the research materials. There's multiple videos in there that are really key to this week's assignments. And make sure you don't read them once, but read them twice. Just don't look at them. Make sure you understand them, because that will be the key to being successful this week for making the eclairs. We have 2 knowledge checks. One is a conversions knowledge check. It's a walk in the park. It's a great way to post attendance. Thank you, everybody, for being here for the week 11 live session. And if you're not, make sure you watch the live session archive, but you wouldn't know because you're not here. And then in the kitchen this week, we are making we're making eclairs filled with pastry cream. So you're going to have to make pâte à choux, pastry cream, and then chocolate ganache. And then down on the bottom of the right-hand corner of this screen right now, you'll see the term pastry cream. Directly below that, this presentation that you are looking at now will be posted there following, should you have additional questions about anything that you missed. So ladies and gentlemen, here's this week's prep list. Wednesday, live session, Thursday, read and understand research materials and complete both knowledge checks. And then on Friday, trust me, we know what we're doing here. Friday, read and review the assignment before you do anything, right? And read and understand the recipes before you do anything. Create a prep list, a timeline, and purchase mise en place. Do that on Friday. Sit down with your cup of coffee. Make sure you have a complete understanding before you take on any work this week. Complete review and submit your assignment on Saturday and Sunday, and then resubmit as suggested Monday and Tuesday, because I'm sure Chef Suzanne will have a few comments to help you improve. Any questions about that, ladies and gentlemen? Chef Suzanne, anything to add to that?
Nope, not yet. I'm excited for this week. I'm not gonna lie. This one's intense. This is so much more awesome, bigger than I think anything we've done so far.
I remember as an evaluator, this is almost as hard as the fried chicken one.
Probably.
Yeah, because I don't think, ladies and gents, I don't know if you guys understand what it's like to look at this beautiful focaccia bread over and over and over again. And then, when you guys did the eggs, you're looking at these eggs and all of a sudden you find yourself in the kitchen making eggs and you don't know why.
I went to the store today and I forgot to get bread flour because I was going to make some focaccia before my family came over, and I got home and I was like, dang it, I forgot to get bread flour. So I did not get it, but I didn't put it on my list. But I was like, gotta get bread flour. I didn't. And I'm still thinking about it, like, okay, maybe when I go out tomorrow. So I may make focaccia tomorrow, I'm not sure. Again,
wow.
Very inspiring, you just don't even know.
Yeah, it's amazing the way that all of you inspire us to prepare these things. So it's kind of cool. So ladies and gents, taking a quick look at our conversions chart. I know it's a little bit blurry, but once you see it in the actual presentations, you'll be able to see it quite clearly. And this week's conversion knowledge check is quite simple. It's only 5 questions. It's ounces and tablespoons. So we are going to dive right into the subject matter this week, and we're going to talk about choux pastry and what eclairs are. Choux pastry also is called pâte de choux, and I know this looks like the word pâté, but it's actually pâte de choux is the way it is pronounced properly. It's a light pastry dough. It's used in a lot of different forms of pastry, from profiteroles, which are right up here in the left-hand corner of the screen, which we use not only for sweet fillings, but for savory fillings as well, such as chicken liver pate, and we'll use those for appetizers. It employs a high moisture content to create steam during to raise the pastry. That is the leavening agent, is the steam. So remember that. An eclair is a long pastry, so to speak, kind of like a long John donut, I always refer to. And it is oblong, filled with a pastry cream traditionally, and topped with a chocolate ganache. However, there are lots of different variants out there. Chef Suzanne, you like chocolate eclairs?
Yes. Yes, I do. I can assure you that more than likely, I will be making these this week, because I don't know that I can handle the pressure. I'm going to have to make them.
I'm just going to go up to the French pastry shop up the street and buy some, but I'm too lazy. All right, ladies and gents, there's still a couple of questions coming in about conversions as far as these recipes are concerned. You do not have to worry about converting. Since we are in the baking pastry part of the class, traditionally things are done by weight in bakeries, not by volume or by liquid measurement. So your scales will convert from ounces to grams. So just remember that when you're doing this week's recipe. This week's recipe, these are the ingredients. You will notice it calls for bread flour right here. You need to use bread flour if at all possible, because the eclairs require additional glutens to hold that structure after it's made. So if you try to use an all-purpose flour or a pastry flour, especially pastry flour, it's not going to work out real well for you. All-purpose flour might work, but bread flour you're going to have the most success with. So make sure that you keep that in mind. And you'll also notice all the recipes listed in grams. That's because everything is done by weight. Remember that grams are a weight measurement, and then liters are liquid measurements. So don't try to measure out 560 grams of water in a measuring cup. It's just not going to work. So it has to be weighed out. Any questions about that? That is the basic recipe for the eclairs. Now, taking a look at how you're going to produce the eclairs, make sure that you preheat your oven first. That's critical. Temperature plays a lot of role here in the eclairs. Like we mentioned a few moments ago, this is not something you want to wait until Tuesday night to make. Eclairs, once they are baked, the best thing to do is to let them kind of sit and dry a little bit, which helps them hold their structure a lot better. So if you cannot make this, the pot au choux, bake it off, and then stuff the eclair right away. You can't. You need to buy yourself time. I recommend making your eclairs on one day and then letting them sit out maybe on top of your oven overnight, which allows them to dry and get rid of some additional moisture. And then the next day, fill them. That's the way that we do it in the commercial environment. So make sure, Chef Suzanne and I just talked to you about organization and planning ahead. That's where the success is in this week's recipe. Make sure that you gather all of your mise en place before you start. When you make pot au choux is a cooked pastry dough. So meaning you're going to be cooking this dough, you can't stop and then run to the store and pick up your butter. It's not going to work. Or you can't run to the store and get your eggs. You have to have everything ready to go. And then, so as you're doing this here, what stage is this? Everybody understands what scalding is, right? Scalding is when you bring milk to 180 degrees. And we're going to get onto that in the next slide right here. So where does it come to the scalding part? Oh, that's the pastry cream. Sorry, I got one slide off. I apologize for that. So first thing you're going to do, preheat your oven to 375 degrees. And then for the pot au choux, you're going to bring some water, salt, and butter to a boil. I do not like to use shortening in pot au choux because I think it affects the way that it leavens quite a bit, because the shortening obviously has no moisture in it, whereas the butter is 20% moisture. So you get a better rise when you make your pot au choux. Make sure that you bring that to a boil, allow all that fat to dissolve completely. And then you're going to remove that mixture from the heat, and then you're going to add all your flour at the same time. And then in the bakery environment, we like to use wooden spoons versus metal spoons quite a bit. Wooden spoons not only offer you the ability to feel a little bit better, but they don't scrape the bottom of your pans. So that is a good tip. So if you don't have one, pick one up. How much does a wooden spoon cost, Chef Suzanne?
Boy, they're not much at all. I would say you can probably get 3 or 4 for probably $1 or $2.
Yeah.
I love the Dollar Trees and Family Dollars and stuff.
Great place to go. We have a whole selection of them at home. What you're looking for when you add your flour, you're going to start stirring that in. You want to make sure that it becomes a smooth mixture with no lumps in there at all, and that it's begun to pull away from the sides of your pot. That's very important. If it's not pulling away from the sides of the pot, that means that you need to add a little bit more flour to your mixture. Does that make sense to everybody? So you're going to have, you have your water, butter, salt in the pot. You've brought it to a boil. You pull it off the stove. You add your flour. You stir it with your wooden spoon until it becomes a nice smooth mixture. And then you need to make sure that it all pulls clean from the side of the pot. If it does not pull clean, add a little bit more flour. And then, so after that, you're going to put it back onto the stove, and you're going to stir it until you see that starchy buildup on the bottom of the pot. What you're doing is you're completely encasing all of those flour granules. Make sure that that fat is dispersed completely within your dough. After that, you can do this by hand. I do not recommend doing it by hand. If you don't have a stand mixer, see if you could borrow one from a friend. If you can't, do it by hand. But number one, try to do it in a mixer. You're gonna remove the dough from the pan. You're gonna place it in the mixer with a paddle attachment, which we'll take a look at here in just a moment. And then you're gonna turn that mixer on medium speed, and you're gonna let it mix for a couple of minutes. And what you're trying to do is you wanna bring the temperature down below 120 degrees. If it's above 120 degrees, you run the risk of cooking the eggs. Does that make sense? So make sure you get your thermometer out and you drop it down below 120 degrees. Make sure you add your eggs in with the machine running one at a time. Turn your machine on low, add one egg, and then add the next. And make sure they're fully incorporated before adding the next. Does that make sense? Okay. At this point, the dough should hold its shape. Pas de choux is a fairly thick paste. You hear sometimes the word batter used. It's very, very thick. So be used to that. And then you're going to need, at this point, to get a pastry bag. And a pastry bag, I highly recommend getting a canvas pastry bag. I know at Walmart they sell plastic pastry bags, which are great when it comes to doing icing work, but this is a very thick mixture. So a canvas pastry bag is going to work out much, much better. You're gonna fill your pastry bag by taking the bag and grabbing it halfway. So this is a pastry bag, grab it halfway, hold it down, over, and there's a video here that I'm gonna show you here in just a sec on how to do this. And then you're gonna fill the pastry bag only halfway up. You don't wanna fill it all the way up because it's gonna be a little bit too tough. And then you're going to take a half sheet pan or a cookie sheet if you have one at home. Make sure you put some parchment paper down because it will stick a little bit. And then you're gonna pipe out your eclairs onto that sheet pan. You wanna leave about 1.5 inches to 2 inches in between each one. And each eclair should be about 4 inches long. Now, when comes to using a pastry bag, you have two hands, right? One is at the back, one is at the front. Always push with the one in the back and drive with the one in the front. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Because you see a lot of people grab pastry bags and they push with the one in the front and all the stuff comes out the back. So always twist, push with your hand at the back, and then drive with the one in the front. It'll make it a lot easier. Now, here's a couple of pieces of equipment that are going to be required for your project this week. This is a paddle attachment over here on the side of the screen. Make sure that you do not use a whisk attachment. It will not work very well for this week's assignment. This is a large star tip. In your pastry bag with doing eclairs, I like to use star tips because it gives the ridges, which seems to hold the ganache a little bit better. But if all you have is a round pastry tip, no problem. That works perfectly fine as well. And then this is a canvas pastry bag, a wooden spoon. So one tip when it comes to piping out your pastry or your pas de choux, it's very thick. So you pipe, it's a little bit of a struggle. I always like to keep a pair of scissors there to cut that dough at the end of the 4-inch length. I hope that makes sense. Or a knife to cut it off, because if you pull it away, you're gonna create a tapered end on your eclair and you don't want that. Do we have any questions so far? Chef Suzanne?
I was Googling while you were talking. So I went to walmart.com and they have piping tips are about $3 each. And the bags, the reusable bags, are $5. And there are also other places that sell piping bags and tips in case anybody's wondering where you can get some kind of smaller, cheaper ones at like dollar stores. But the Wilton brand are pretty good. Hobby Lobby and Michael's craft stores and things have those also. So those are just FYI, Walmart has those.
If you do use the plastic bags, the ones at Walmart, and I've used those many, many times, you can actually double the bags up. So you can take one bag and then put another bag on the inside of it. And I would recommend doing that for this exercise. Chip Van, what is your question?
Hi, Chef.
Hi.
So for this assignment, I don't have a standard mixer or anyone I can borrow it from. So with a handheld electric whisker or mixer work, you're saying it won't?
You could try. I've never done that before. Number one, this particular dough or batter pat a choux requires a fair amount of mixing because you have to develop those glutens. So that's very, very important. And then the incorporation of the egg requires that velocity of a mixer. So it can be done by hand, and you could try with your electric handheld mixer. I haven't done that before. I'd be interested to see how it comes out, though.
The only doubt I have with that, and tell me if you think it's right, is the paddle attachment. It looks it's just folding the dough instead of actually agitating it the way a whisker might. That's the only doubt I have with the hand whisk. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely
the
stick.
attachment is shaped so differently.
Yeah, definitely stick with the paddle. Do not use the whisk.
Yeah, see that the handheld doesn't have a paddle, so I'm gonna have to make my hand into a paddle.
Okay. All right, Chid Van. I know it can be done that way. Yeah.
Okay, we'll try.
Thank you. Kenneth, what's up?
Hey, most of us, if I believe I'm correct, when we first started class in our toolkits, we all received pastry tips and also a pastry bag. So most of us should already have all that stuff.
That is true. Yes. That is true.
Not the paddle, that's all.
Yeah, not the paddle attachment though.
No, that would be nice.
Yeah, and the KitchenAid mixer to go with it.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
All right, thanks for bringing that up, Kenneth. I appreciate that. Ladies and gents, do we have any more questions about how to make the pot au choux? So the pot au choux, just to cover that once again, make sure that you measure everything out in grams on your scale. It is not liquid measurements, it's done by weight. Step one is you put everything into a thicker pot. You're going to put it on the stove, bring your water, butter, salt to a boil, and then you're going to take it off the stove and you're going to add your flour. After you work it in and stir it thoroughly, make sure there's no more lumps and it's a smooth batter at that point. Make sure it pulls away from the sides. If it doesn't, make sure that you add a little bit more flour to it. And then thirdly, you're going to put it back onto the stove, and then you're going to cook it over medium heat until it just begins to get that starchy white buildup on the bottom of the pot. If you're using a real thin pan, you might run into a challenge there with some burn spots. So try to stick with a thicker bottom pan, if at all possible, or pot. And then you're going to take it out and you're going to put it into a mixer or a bowl if you don't have the mixer with the paddle attachment. Make sure that you mix it until it cools down below 120 degrees. Make sure that it is not hotter than that because you run the risk of scrambling your eggs. And then you're going to incorporate one egg at a time. Make sure it's fully incorporated before you add the next egg. Once the eggs have been incorporated, you can then put it into your pastry bag. Only fill the pastry bag halfway. And then make sure that when you pipe your stuff onto your sheet pan with parchment paper, make sure that you push with your backhand and drive with your front hand. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I've made that mistake many times and I see it happen all the time. So, and then you want to pipe them out about 1.5 inches, 2 inches apart. And you want to make sure that you cut the end after you've piped it out 4 inches. Either use a knife or a pair of scissors to cut the batter so you don't get that tapered end on it. Goes into a 375-degree oven. Remember, the leavening agent is the moisture or the steam that's created, so they're going to rise up nicely. They should be hollow in the center. And then when they are golden brown and slightly crispy on the outside, you're going to pull them out of the oven. And then I prefer that you put them onto a rack and let them dry out overnight in a nice warm spot. And then the next day, you can move on to the next part, which is our next segment. Any
Do we
questions?
cover them?
I don't like covering them because what you're trying to do is you're trying to allow all that additional moisture to evaporate. And if you do cover them, then you run the risk of them collapsing. Sound good? Ladies and gents, here's a quick video. I'm not going to play this for you, but this is one of the things that we always look for in kitchens. When we have a new hire or someone new that comes in and says, I have all this experience, and then see if they can fill a pastry bag is really a telltale sign. So make sure you watch this video and pay close attention to it. I'll let you do that on your own time. We are going to move into the pastry cream right now. Pastry cream, you can do a lot of different things with this. In the Southwest, you know, that we add all sorts of funny things to it, and I'm sure they do in the South and everywhere else. We asked this week that you stick with the pastry cream to get that original flavor. Make sure that you do notice that everything is done in grams once again. Once again, your scale can do everything in grams. You're not using your measuring cups, tablespoons, or teaspoons this week. And then make sure that you follow this exactly. So for example, 38 grams of cornstarch. If you decide to get a little lackadaisical and only do 34 grams of cornstarch, you will have a variance in the consistency of your pastry cream. So make sure you follow all of this exactly. Gather all of your mise en place before you start the project, because this is a cooked pastry cream. So you cannot be running to the store halfway through. Okay, first thing you're going to do is you're going to combine your milk and sugar together in a heavy saucepan, and you're going to bring that to a scald. And I accidentally mentioned a moment ago that scalding in the restaurant industry is kind of an old school term. It kind of goes back to the days before they homogenized and pasteurized milk. We want to bring it up to 180 degrees, which kills all the bacteria, and it also changes the way the enzymes behave. So you want to make sure that you do that. This recipe is what we call a tempered technique. Tempering is when you bring two different substances to like temperatures. We're working with eggs and egg yolks in this recipe. So if we have cold egg yolks and we add hot milk, we're going to get one effect, or vice versa. So we need to have everything about the same. In a medium bowl, you're going to combine the cornstarch, a second sugar with a hand whisk, and you're going to make sure that you whisk that real well and get that all smoothed out. And then you're going to add the egg yolks and the whole eggs, and you're going to mix those until they lighten in color. What you're trying to do is incorporate a little bit of air and oxygen. The oxygen will actually lighten the color of the egg yolks as it is exposed. So whisk those for a few minutes. You're going to slowly begin tempering the egg yolk mixture by taking your scalded milk, and as you're stirring your egg yolk, cornstarch, sugar mixture, you're going to slowly pour that milk in to completely combine that mixture. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions? We all good? Did I miss anything, Chef Suzanne?
Nope.
I'm on a roll tonight. Okay.
You are on a roll. I'm just sort of sitting here tonight because you got this, and this is so much information, and it's so important. So I'm just chilling back here.
I sat on the beach today and I just thought about this all day. Yeah. All right. There we go. So we're going to return that mixture. Now that you've tempered that mixture, what you're trying to do, if you do not temper it properly, you're going to curdle your egg yolks. Been there, done that. So make sure that you follow that technique properly. Scald the milk, combine the egg yolks, eggs, sugar, and cornstarch into a bowl. Stir them vigorously as you're adding the scalded milk. That's called tempering. So you're bringing everything to like temperature. You're going to return that entire mixture back to your saucepan. You're going to put it on the stove, and you're going to stir it consistently and continuously until it comes to a boil. If you do not bring it to a boil, the cornstarch will not take. Cornstarch requires a boil. right? So if you only bring it up to 190 degrees and say that's good enough, it ain't gonna thicken up, right? So make sure that you do bring it to a boil. Allow to boil for just a moment or two. Make sure that you are stirring. This activates the cornstarch and makes it come to life. As soon as it is thick and it's reached that consistency, make sure you remove it from the heat, but make sure that you continue to stir. Don't just pull it to the side and let it hang out. And then you're gonna whisk in the vanilla extract and the butter until it is completely incorporated. You're gonna add your butter piece by piece. A piece of butter, whisk, and then a little butter, whisk, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're gonna pour this onto a sheet pan and cover it with plastic. The reason you have to cover it with plastic, if you don't, it's gonna develop what we call a skim or a scum over the top, which will not be usable. Isn't that right, Chef Suzanne? You ever have that happen?
Not in this particular, not with pastry cream, but yes, I've definitely had that happen. Yeah.
It happens with sauces.
Cornstarch is an amazing thickener, but that weird layer of skin that forms on the top of stuff weirds me out. So yeah.
Yeah.
That would make me very sad if my pastry cream had skin on top.
You kind of pick it up and you kind of, it's like weird, you know? But the reason you have to pour it out onto a sheet pan is you need to expose as much surface area to the cool air as quickly as possible. If you pour it into like a cylinder type dish, you're not going to be exposing very much surface, which is going to force the heat to remain on the inside of the pastry cream for quite a while. Once that is cooled down, you're going to take another pastry bag and you're going to fill it a little bit, about halfway once again, right? Take it, fold it down over the sides, fill it just like in the video that you're going to watch here. And then make sure you use a smaller round tip. A number 3 is fantastic for this. Tips are sold by numbers, right? So small number, big tip, large number, small tip. And then you're going to poke a hole at one end of your eclair and poke a hole at the other end of your eclair. You're going to take your pastry bag and then you're going to pipe the pastry cream after it is cool into your eclair. And then you will have filled eclairs. And then in a moment here, we're going to take a look at the ganache recipe. And you're going to take your eclair and you're going to just gently set the top of the eclair into the ganache, allow the excess ganache to drip, turn it upside down and set it onto a wire rack and allow it to cool, and you'll be done. Am I right, Chef Suzanne? Did I get the done part right?
You did.
Yes. Chocolate ganache is one of the most versatile, simple substances out there. There's lots that you can do with it, but for this particular exercise, you're just melting chocolate and cream, and that is going to be the top of the eclair. Now, this recipe is also in the book, and it's also listed under the research materials. So quite simple. This is chocolate sauce as well. You can do this one or this one. And then there is a link to a YouTube video right down here at the bottom. Here are some photos of some finished eclairs and kind of some of the stuff that Chef Suzanne and I are hoping to see turned in no later than next Tuesday. And these are pretty ideal images of what they should be looking like. You can see how that pot of choux will open up and create a nice cavity in there. Which will be perfect. Chef Suzanne, what did I miss?
I don't necessarily that you didn't miss anything. I know that I have already gotten a couple messages about it. What should you put on top? And so like Chef was just saying, you've got different options. So you've got like the chocolate sauce, or you could just melt some chocolate. But in my opinion, and probably Chef will agree, the best of the best of the best is chocolate ganache. It is amazing. I think that's also what they use in the video. I think Chef Ann is making ganache, and ganache is just magically good stuff. So if you've never made ganache, you're going to fall in love with it. It is delicious. So You'll probably want to eat that with a spoon. So I was actually just put in the chat box that we are using the pastry cream cold for eclairs, but definitely try a spoonful while it's still warm because it's really good. But it's traditionally served cold, but it's really yummy when it's still warm. So just FYI. So,
Yeah, absolutely delicious. And you are so right about the chocolate ganache. They should have rehab for that stuff. I think that stuff is just delicious. And there's a lot of different directions you can go with that. But once again, ladies and gents, we really want to make sure that everybody just masters this technique. Make sure that you do stick with the recipe this week. Don't go crazy adding additional toppings or anything else or additional flavorings to the filling. We want to make sure that you understand the pastry cream. It's very, very important. Let's move on and take a look at our assignment this week. I wasn't able to put this into the slides because it's just too big. So for each one of the three categories that we're looking at this week, we need a self-identification photo and make sure that we know what week it is in the photo with the current date. Sanitizing bucket, I cannot stress how important that is once you get into industry because it's going to be everywhere. Picture of your mise en place. We mentioned this several times throughout the class tonight. Make sure you gather all your mise en place before you start any of these projects this week. And then a photo during the production and finished process for each one of the three items. And then don't forget your narrative reflection sheet. This is very, very important. Once you get into industry, you're going to realize the value of these narrative sheets. I know they don't make a lot of sense right now, and you're kind of like wondering, why are you making us do this? Trust me, when you're standing in front of your service staff someday and you're trying to explain to your cooks and your guests and your service staff the flavors of this product that you're making, you're really going to understand. So it is a project that will pay dividends. Does anybody have any questions out there? Chef Suzanne?
we've got some questions in the box about making white chocolate ganache versus chocolate ganache. I myself have never made it. I don't know that I've ever had it. I don't know.
You can make white chocolate ganache, and it is a legitimate thing. It's going to behave differently based on the quantities in this week's recipe. So if we could this week just stick with the dark chocolate, it's a little bit more traditional. So that's a good question though. What's another question?
Another question is asking about folding in some minced up strawberries into the pastry cream.
That is a feasible thing, and that is something you can do for this week. We do not recommend doing that because number one, you're using a smaller pastry tip, and number three pastry tip for this, and it's very difficult to be piping pastry cream when there are even a brunoise of strawberries in there because they do get hot in the tip, and it's going to be a very frustrating experience. So for this week, we ask that you just stick with the traditional pastry cream. Any other questions?
I do not see any other questions. I'm
Wonderful.
not sure if there's any more. Anybody? Questions?
Ladies and gents, I was sorry to go through it so fast through tonight's class. I was a little bit worried. Number one, it's a little bit more of an extensive assignment, but I was also worried about the internet dropping like it did last week. Marshall, what's going on?
Where do we get the recipe for the chocolate ganache from? Because it's not in the assignment, the experience assignment.
It's actually in the book, which you have access to the book, the professional cooking. However, it's going to be in the weekly presentation, which will be posted on the class page here in a few minutes. The weekly presentation will be right below pastry cream.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
Hi, V.
Hey, quick question, Chef.
Sure.
Freezing after it's all done. Can you freeze it, and what's the longevity on that? If you want to freeze the extra eclairs.
Longevity, as far as freezing is concerned, there is no association with longevity in the United States or any type of code or principle when it comes to freezing food. Any local health department has no definition of how long something can be frozen. So in any restaurant, you could freeze something for years if you choose to freeze it, because according to the local authorities, that stops the breakdown of foods or the development of bacteria. but bacteria or the eclairs will hold in the freezer for a period of a couple of months. I've seen successfully before. Pastry cream, though, when it does thaw out, will have a tendency to crack, or when it freezes, it also cracks, and it kind of exposes itself to crystallization. So I don't like freezing them, but you can. It is possible.
Okay, thank you, Chef.
You're welcome. Any other questions, ladies and gents? Thank you very much for an exciting week 11 live session in CU 122. Make sure that we post attendance, please. Keep it going. I want this class to be number one. Make sure that you do not procrastinate on this week's assignment. It's very, very important. Make sure that you understand that any makeup assignments, including any missed knowledge checks or anything else, are due no later than Tuesday, June the 18th at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Any questions about your grades or concerns, make sure you reach out, you get a hold of us. We are here to help you succeed. And I hope everybody has a fantastic week. Take care, everybody.